I'd like to draw the attention tonight to the concept of extremism.
Hmm.
Extreme situations, extreme actions, which we might see on our media or we might
Hmm.
see on our streets. Now,
Hmm.
normally, people have no reason to act in a strange or an unusual manner. I mean, we all just want to take care of our families, go to work every day, pay our bills, buy our food, save for the future, and most people, unless you're a crazy testosterone controlled male teenager, don't really look for that much excitement. Okay,
Right.
they'd rather sit in front of a warm fire and or perhaps do some light exercise or some sports or something predictable. So how is it and why is it that we see a lot of unwarranted behavior in our streets these days? And it's been going on for a couple of years, and I believe it's starting to accelerate. And
Hmm.
I've got a theory. I've got a theory
Sure.
as to why. I believe it's a sign of the times, and the times are the loss of the empire's power over us.
Oh,
We have been living in an empire.
right.
It's been an invisible empire. We haven't known about it. We thought we had independent countries. We thought we had, discrete political organizations in our communities. We didn't realize that we've actually been under the control of an international system,
Mm.
a world government that's been hidden. It's been hidden, and then when they talk about world government, well, it kind of makes me smile because we've had it for a long time. It's
Hmm.
just never been overt. It's been covert. It's been
Right.
behind our backs. It's been forcing us into wars and economic problems like depressions or booms and bust periods for hundreds, if not thousands, of years.
Hmm.
And now we're beginning to see an extreme reaction around the world. Things like local ridiculous wars in Ukraine, Sudan, other hotspots. We're seeing these agitations. Things like I don't know, emergencies to do with energy, emergencies to do with gender, emergencies to do with politics. Everything seems to be falling apart, and it's causing extreme reactions
Sure.
and extreme situations in our people. Just to give you a small example, in my own hometown here of Vancouver, how is it that our unfortunate homeless drug population has expanded from approximately a steady rate of around 1,500 to 2,000 people to almost 10,000 people in the last 3 years? How did that happen? What was the cause? That's causing extreme disruption in our society.
Hmm.
Another sign of extreme times is how is it that our libraries and schools are full of what my parents would call deviant behavior.
Right.
What my parents, who grew up in the 1950s, would call antisocial,
Mm.
anti-religious,
Mm.
anti-child, and unethical. They would actually consider these people to be promoting damaging and destructive ideologies onto our children. Yet we're not stopping it. And because it's been institutionalized, it's actually in being promoted by our school boards and by our local governments.
Hmm.
I call that extreme. That's
Right.
extreme, social activity. It's not normal. We've talked about these things in the past in the local level.
Sure.
It disrupts society. It takes us away from taking care of our families. It takes us away from educating our children. It's a slap in the face to normality, is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and what's the
Hmm.
origin? Well, I would like to suggest that the origin is the collapse of a control mechanism and a control system that is lashing out. It's lashing out in a destructive way. In other words, if it can't have power, it's not going to allow us to be free.
Correct.
It's like if you don't mind this analogy, which I've made many times before, it's like the behavior of the Nazis at the end of World War II. For example, they gave out orders in the last months of the war to execute all the prisoners in their jails and prison camps
Mm-hmm.
because they had control over them and didn't want them to ever be free, so they were going to kill them.
Right.
The ultimate in extremism, of course, is murder. And why did they do that? Because when an uh, uh, extremely fascistic system loses power, it shows its true colors. It shows its true colors by demonstrating without control. Like normally, it would control those and veil those actions under layers of propaganda or government rules and regulations and laws. But when it's losing control, it hangs people from the nearest lamppost.
Right.
And when it loses control, it starts to eliminate its political opponents, by execution. And I believe that or it organizes riots in the streets in order to distract the populace's attention from the fact that it's now looting the country in its final days on its way to escape.
Right.
Watch the news. What are we seeing? We're seeing massive theft on a grand scale of our public purse. I'm not going to go into details because that will attract too much attention. But if you open your eyes and look at the news, you'll see that there's really massive corruption going on at all levels of government. And this is normal for people that see that they're about to lose control and lose power.
Right.
What do? You grab everything you can and you run for the hills.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got any input on this or corroboration?
Um, I think we're definitely reaching some sort of precipice in this case, meaning that those evil characters from government levels to local community levels, they are because they stole our trust over the decades, and now in turn, they run amok.
Yes.
Basically, either throwing out some unrealistic spendy schemes that benefits no one other than some special agenda
Yes.
organizations, or they just try to simply or find some means to indirectly launder our money and
Yes.
fatten up their wallets.
Well, that's exactly right. And I guess I'm going to just break my little promise here, and I am going to name names and point out a particular case
Sure.
that just happened very recently in my country here of Canada, and that is a massive government subsidy designed to attract a Volkswagen factory in Ontario, in the east of our country, which is the manufacturing area. And it's an electric vehicle battery plant, apparently. Now, why would you make an electric vehicle battery plant in a country with no lithium? That's the first question.
Exactly.
In other words, it would have to be imported from another place. So why don't you make the battery plant close to the place where you're going to get the raw material? That's called efficiency. Okay.
That's right.
But
But in the name of globalization, in terms of economy, which has been aggressively promoted in the
Yes.
last half century or so,
Yep.
And obviously, these goons would try to make it seems as though building electric vehicle battery manufacturing facilities in Canada
Yes.
makes sense to them.
Well, I want to put this into perspective financially. It's
Right.
approximately 12 billion Canadian dollars was spent
Hmm.
on direct
Hmm.
COVID subsidies and
Hmm.
expenses to do with the vax and to do with grants to people who had lost their jobs and corporations who had lost their profits and the total expenses. And it's probably a lot more, but I know for at least 1 year it was $12 billion,
Right.
and that's taxpayer funded borrowing.
That's
Okay,
right.
that's a loan.
Or should I, or typically I would refer to as stealing.
Absolutely.
They say borrowing, but hey, who's gonna suffer down the road? It's our
It's
next generations, our sons
that's
and
right.
daughters, our grandsons and
That's
granddaughters.
right. It's using our credit to
That's
increase the
right.
debt. It's like giving the credit card to somebody who ran out and bought a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't tell you that they were going to do before they grabbed that card. Okay?
Correct.
And notice it's happening again because 12 billion happens to be the amount that's being granted to the VW corporation in to build this plant. But the actual cost of
Right.
building the plant is only 7 billion.
That's right.
The other
What happened to
what's
the rest of the money?
what's the rest of the money? Well, the rest of the money is supposedly a tax credit. In other words,
Hmm.
it's they don't have to pay taxes for so many years that comes to another several billion.
Right.
And then there's a bunch of other stuff that's all in the fine print, to having to do with imports and export duties that they're now exempt from paying, and that comes to several more billion. So the whole thing's a $12 billion package for one company to build something we don't need. And we don't need it because we produce oil and gas in this country
That's right.
in abundance. We
That's
produce so
right.
much oil and gas that we're exporting it whenever we can, or but we can't easily because our government, who may or may not be patriotic,
Hmm.
is blocking our homegrown industries at every turn. And instead,
Yeah.
they're subsidizing the VW, Volkswagen
Yep.
company, to a
Yep.
foreign company with very little Canadian shareholder, investment, to come here and build electric batteries for who? For Volkswagen cars, and those cars will be sold, and who will profit? Well, it's not
The
a Canadian
company
company.
itself.
Canadians won't profit. The only people who will
Correct.
get any benefit are the employees of that company, which can't be more than a couple of thousand.
That's
So
right.
why, in a million years, would you lend somebody $12 billion to employ a couple of thousand people? It's total
Well,
insanity.
that's right.
So let's get down into it a little deeper. Who actually controls this company? And who actually calls the shots to tell somebody to invest in something which we do not need, and which, by the way, is losing market value every day and popularity because people now know that electric vehicles are a scam.
Right.
They're not efficient. They're actually not empowering to the individual because they cause reliance on things that are out of your control. Like, for example, the power goes off, you can't charge your car.
Yes.
But if the power goes off, you still have a gas car because it's got a gas tank, and if you're a forward thinking person, you have extra gas around, right?
Correct.
Another problem is it's so electronically controlled that if like, there's actually cases where people bought electric modern vehicles on credit and then didn't pay their payments on time, and through the cloud server they were able to you know turn off the car so you couldn't drive it.
Correct.
So you can't drive your car because you didn't pay your bills.
Yep.
But you can't do that with a gas car because it's autonomous.
That's right.
So there seems to be some kind of hidden agenda of government control over the individual that's connected with electric vehicles, and
Yes.
it's undeniable. It's there. So what's going on here? We're paying $12 billion to the VW Corporation, and once again, who founded VW?
Nazis.
And where was it located? In a new town called Wolfsburg. Wolfsburg is the current location of the VW factory. And who's Wolfsburg named after? It's named after Adolf Hitler because his nickname was the Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And Wolfsburg is Wolf Town.
Mm-hmm.
This is a completely Nazi organization. In fact, after World War II, many SS people who tried to escape prosecution changed their names and were given, you guessed it, factory jobs at VW.
Sure.
This is a completely unethical corporation that used slave labor during World War II to produce the V1 rocket. Did you know they were made by VW? Well, now you do. And yet our government, who pretends to be so far, far ahead of the curve as far as justice and social ethics and doing things for, to repair the crimes of the past, like injustices against First Nations and so on, would hire a Nazi-founded and perhaps still controlled to this day corporation to come here and then give it to us, give them $12 billion of our hard-earned money. And nobody is doing anything about it, and nobody even understands that this is a crime. Stop.
Stop.